Hi, listeners. Our guest today is Lisa Erickson, and I apologize ahead of time, but some powerful stuff happened during the show that she and I both were experiencing, and we didn't know it until after the show. So every kind of technological beep, buzz, whatever, that we had shut everything off, it all decided to come on during the show. So we tried to mitigate it as much as possible and stay focused and not be distracted. But, you know, it was challenging, and we decided it's because we had powerful stuff to say. So we're going to play this show on Empowered Empaths and also on Mental Health News Radio. And you'll hear more about her and what she does. And she'll be back on in March of 2020. She's going to come and talk to us about the kind of powerful energy that happens for women when they are just about to enter into menopause. And then certainly me. So I look forward to her coming back, and enjoy this show on Mental Health News Radio Network.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Lisa, thanks so much for coming on Mental Health News Radio.
Thank you for having me, Kristin. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure how we found out about you, but I'm glad that we did. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what it is that you do?
I am an energy worker, and I work with the chakras, or energy centers in the body. And primarily, I help women. I do work with both men and women, but I help women. I guide them through various imagery, breathing, and other tools related to the chakras for stress management, for personal growth, for what I call women's energetics work, which has to do with helping women, guiding women through life transits and working with energetic cycles related to pregnancy and menopause and other big life transits. And then I also, another specialty is sexual trauma healing. And I utilize the chakras to aid women with sexual trauma healing.
Okay. How long have you been doing this work, and what made you, this isn't your typical work that's out there. So what brought you, on this particular journey?
Well, I have been doing this particular work for about 15 years. But my career started out very differently. I was a technology executive about 30 years ago, straight out of college, and I experienced a lot of stress issues, a lot of stress-related health issues. And I ended up wandering into a yoga and meditation class, and it really transformed my life in a lot of ways. And from there, I began a chakra meditation practice, and I found of all the forms of meditation, for me personally, that was the most helpful because it helped me connect to my body, since the chakras are located in the body.
Right.
And it helped me really, because it involved imagery, potentially sounds. It was more engaging for me than other forms. But then I migrated to energy healing when I had my first daughter about 16 years ago, and I had a lot of health issues after her birth. And it really led me to explore this other side of the chakras, and specifically how the chakras function a little bit differently for women, and how women can really work with them specifically around health-related issues and stress management a little differently than men.
Right. I just did a show yesterday where I spoke with someone who works with horses and works
Mm,
with veterans and other first responders. And I did not know this, or maybe I heard it, but it didn't sink in. And I have a horse, but he said, when
mm.
you ride a horse, your root chakra is right on their heart chakra.
Oh,
And I
that's
went,
lovely.
whoa, that's why it's so. I mean, there are many other reasons why it's so powerful. Being with a horse, it certainly is for me, but I did not know that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think both dogs and horses, humans have a very special relationship to, and it is an energetic relationship. I mean, there are other animals too that we can form these bonds with, but those two animals in particular have been found to have so many stress management and health benefits when we interact with them. I know a lot of
Absolutely.
friends that have gotten their dogs certified to be caretaker dogs in hospitals and things like
Right.
that. I do feel it's a chakra connection.
There, I noticed on your website, Chakra Empowerment for Women, that you've got a page that has different, root bowl activation as an example, sacral lotus activation. Can you tell our listeners what those are?
Yeah. So that is actually from my book called Chakra Empowerment for Women that was just released in December. And in this book, I am trying to provide tools that any woman can use, regardless of whether she's already familiar with the chakras. And they're really tailored to the specifics of women's energy bodies. That our energy bodies are really anchored in our second chakra, which is in the pelvis, and so working with our cycles and working with our second chakra in particular is very important. But with those tools, I'm focused a lot on how you can activate the chakras in your daily life. That's really a big focus of the book. If you are feeling anxious, what can you do right in the moment to connect with, for example, your root chakra, which tends to bring you into presence in your body and it help you manage whatever's arising, whatever uncomfortable emotions are arising. Or if you need a boost of confidence, how can you really center in your navel chakra? If you're about to do public speaking, how can you really feel centered in your throat chakra that you're going to speak clearly and strongly? So that's one focus of the book. And then another focus is sexual trauma healing, how you can use these same tools on a daily basis in combination with therapy or any other healing modality that you like to help shift patterns that may have been caused by sexual traumatic experiences.
I'd love you to go into some more detail about that piece because there's so many listeners that have had sexual trauma at a young age even, but also through just having really abusive relationships with people that are psychologically abusive as well as other types of abuse, but that specifically, and sometimes physically that was the best sex they'd ever had,
Mm.
and yet there was and that was used kind of as a weapon,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of withholding and things like that. And so they may not have trauma from an act, from being raped or being molested, but they have trauma related to the act of sex after what happened with this really abusive relationship.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that scenario because there are so many different scenarios, and we tend to think of sexual and abuse and assault in terms of these stereotypical scenarios. But this example is an abusive relationship in which the sex itself may have been physically satisfying, but overall the relationship was abusive. And so sexuality becomes entwined with that for the person.
Yes.
And in fact, individuals who were sexually abused as children in some way are at a greater risk of ending up in that kind of relationship because their whole
Yep.
relationship to sex is very skewed. And it's interesting. It reflects in a lot of different ways in the energy body, but one of them is in relation to that second chakra, which is related to our sexual energy, either shutting it down completely, which is what some individuals do. They really shut themselves off from sexual energy and sexual activity. And then that means they even shut themselves off from really any kind of physical pleasure. They may disassociate from the physical body and really have hatred towards their body or dislike or such indifference that they don't care for their body well. They don't experience their body as pleasurable in any way, right? But then on the
Right.
other end of the spectrum, especially for women, can be someone who their entire worthiness and identification becomes wrapped up with themselves as a sexual being. They can't see any other aspect of themselves. They have tied their worthiness to being able to sexually attract and engage in sexual behavior. And that is not satisfying either, because their worth is not tied to an internal sense of their true value or anything else other than their sexuality. So it kind of swings both ways.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I look at it a lot like when we talk about eating disorders, and there's anorexia, and then there's bulimia, or there's the withholding of food, and then there's the binge eating of food, and it's the root of it is the same, but the way it's, manifests in someone, it can be, completely different.
Exactly. It's really very similar to that. I agree.
So when you're working with someone, can you talk a little bit about what that process is like? Someone comes to you from, say, that kind of a relationship, and they, and now they just feel so don't trust themselves at all. They feel like I've heard many say, I feel like my body completely betrayed me, because they did have an orgasm, or, they did enjoy the sex physically, but then the emotional scarring that came from a lot of them being degraded after the act of sex by the person that they're with, because that's all part of the game. And so, there's so much tied up in and really our emotions get wrapped up in that, and that makes it even that much more powerful.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the second chakra is also linked to our emotions and our emotional body. So it becomes very complicated for us. Even child sexual abuse survivors can have that experience where they experience some physical pleasure and didn't really understand it at the time. They may have been too young, but later on, as they understand what it was, they do feel betrayed by their body, and they feel great sense of shame. So this is a part of the healing process. What tends to happen, what I find, one of the main patterns I find in sexual trauma survivors, is some level of disassociation from the body.
Yeah.
And how that reflects energetically is not a full connection to either the root chakra, the first chakra, or the second chakra in the pelvis, the root at the tailbone, the second in the pelvis. They are linked to our physical body, our physical health, and our emotional health. And when those chakras are disassociated from, and someone tends to live up, either in their navel, their heart, their third eye, or these upper chakras, there's a lot of issues with that. So my first work is really usually trying to help someone connect with those lower chakras, get comfortable even with just focusing and visualizing and breathing into these parts of their body. From there, that usually will cue up certain emotions to be dealt with, shame being the main one.
Right.
And then I have a variety of different tools for kind of working with how shame feels in the body and how we can gently release it and shift our relationship to our body.
I remember going years ago to someone and working with this for 6 months one-on-one with someone. And then I went to a workshop with, there was a nurse there. She was a nurse and a midwife, and she actually did some physical exercises around finding areas in your vaginal area that maybe were, you had stored trauma and things like that. It was really powerful. Now I feel like I'm much more able to talk about those things today, and not many people think anything of it, because it's much more, I don't want to say mainstream, but it's much more accepted. But at the time I did it, when I would tell a couple of friends that did, they're like, you girl, you crazy.
Yep.
I was like, listen, I was sexually abused. I know you were too. You probably could have benefited from this.
Yeah, and I'm glad the taboo is shifting, but there still is quite a taboo, and we still have a lot of blame the victim language
absolutely.
and in our culture that really prevents people from coming forth and reaching out for help. But I love that modality, and there, more and more we're realizing with trauma, and I'm sure you have a lot of guests talk about this as well, that talk therapy has a role, but we need to get into the body, because trauma is really stored in the body. And it's interesting for me, what I find is for some sexual trauma survivors in particular, physical modalities are too intimidating. Talk therapy seems too intimidating because you're alone in a room with a stranger. So this kind of chakra work for some people is this middle ground. It's like because the chakras are this interface between your psyche and your body. So it's like you're coming in the middle, and then you can get more comfortable with your body and more comfortable with talk. It's not, there's different modalities for everyone, I firmly believe, but this is why it works for some people, I think.
Right. Can you explain how a session with you works?
Yeah. So we will talk first. And the most important thing is creating a feeling of safety. And I'm trained in trauma sensitivity through an organization called the Breathe Network, which I want to get a plug in for. It's a nonprofit, but what it does is connect and list practitioners who are trauma informed around sexual trauma healing. So anyway, but it's really important to create a feeling of safety and choice and create a feeling that we're working together. I'm not taking them through some magical processes that are out of their control. So I think that's the first step. Then I'm really asking them to explain to me how they feel their trauma is impacting them in their life right now. And we start there as opposed to going back through history necessarily. Is it anxiety? Is it certain situations that bring on anxiety? Is it a lack of self-care in the body, different physical manifestations, weight, or an eating disorder, or addiction issues? What is it that they feel they're dealing with? What other modalities are they currently pursuing? And then we get into feeling just really in a daily situation. Where did that anxiety or that particular pattern get triggered? What happened that felt threatening? Where did you feel it in your body? And we work with the chakras to bring forth counter energies to imagine loosening those energies, rewriting that situation in your memory, and becoming comfortable in your body, really expanding the window of tolerance that what you can handle in your body, the sense of resilience that, this is just a feeling of discomfort. I can be with this feeling as opposed to going into my usual pattern of fight, flight, or freeze, or whatever my pattern is.
Right. Exactly. Oops. Sorry about that. That's my daily 11:11 alarm that goes off telling me to remember to receive gratefully.
Well, let's do it. Let's receive gratefully for a moment.
Absolutely. Listeners, definitely do this with us. All right, I could go on, but dead air is a hard thing on the radio. Yeah. But just a minute of that, listeners. That goes off for me every day. I do it with a friend of mine, Adam Klugman, and he's on the West Coast, and we were talking about being extreme empaths and how we're always giving, and we don't. We haven't always been good receivers.
And I find this is such a big trauma theme.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. Because, our value for many years had come from how much can we give?
Exactly.
And that gets very lopsided. So that's just a reminder every day for us to go, okay, you need to say I receive gratefully.
Yeah. And I deserve to receive, right?
Absolutely. And I deserve to receive. Absolutely. Hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY, candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstrespondermentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissisticabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show. So anyway, thanks for doing that with me.
No, that's perfect. I love it. And that's a big part of the heart chakra work that is I include in the book and exercises is just, we think we give and give from our heart, but are allowing ourselves to receive from the heart on a lot of different levels, for sure.
Absolutely. So what have you seen in terms of people that are, maybe they're absolutely good in their head and they're doing a lot of work to connect that to their heart, but they're still disconnected from those lower chakras because of the sexual trauma, and that manifests often as an eating disorder.
Yeah. Well, and if someone has an eating disorder or an addiction issue of any type, that is someone that I want them to be in therapy in addition to their work with me.
Right.
So I have certain things that I feel need to be worked at multiple levels, right? Excuse me. So I just want to make that clear. But with eating disorders, what my work will often be related to the second chakra, and pleasure was where I'll often start. Meaning trying to help shift their relationship to sensual experience, which includes taste and enjoying and being in their body as a joyful experience, dancing perhaps with no mirrors, no one able to see you, experiencing your body as pleasurable. A bath, it's really individual for each person in terms of what sensual experiences are pleasurable for them.
Right.
And that is a way, and then along with some sacral chakra meditations that I really like for that kind of work, and they work together.
I love, I live in a gorgeous place, but I'm moving, and I'm moving to have a property where I walk outside and there's my horse. And I can't tell you how excited I am to get a bathtub again.
Yeah.
Because I haven't had one for a good 18 months, maybe 2 years. And I realized, and I thought, I'll be fine. I can just take a shower. Oh, no. I live for the bathtub.
No, and it's interesting because each chakra is linked to the elements, and the second chakra is linked to water. So just sitting there in water is tremendously cleansing. It clears our whole energy body, because women in particular, women empaths, take energy in, and that's really rooted in the second chakra. And so the water really cleanses on an energy body level as well. So you just instinctively know what you need.
It's amazing. I find this fascinating, and I'm sure, you do too, but I find it fascinating how much we know, and, wherever anybody, believes spiritually, religiously, whatever, whatever take on it, that's your own take. But we really do know how to care for ourselves, even at a feral level. Because there were things that I've done during really abusive relationships where I didn't know that what I was doing was just this ninja Amazon goddess warrior stuff to protect myself, like taking a lot of baths and whatever I was doing. And there was a lot of shame around some of the stuff because I didn't know that it was okay, which is one of the reasons why I do this show. So I could say, hey, here's all the stuff that somebody would label me cuckoo for I did, but I did those things and they actually were really good for me. So if you're doing them, please put the shame in it, kick it out the door. It doesn't belong That's here. Right. So it's kind of amazing, I think, what you're doing too, because we all have that ability. It's all here and we do utilize it. A lot of times we just don't know that that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very important to own that part of you, because that's the part of you that, wants to survive and grow, and really recognizing, that is in there, I think is really important. I have that strength. And even patterns of disassociation, when we're working to heal them, it's important to recognize that when they developed, when we were being abused or whatever the history was, we developed those patterns to help us survive.
Right.
So those patterns, it's not that they were bad, it's just they're not needed now, and now they're holding us back. But we honor them for having been self-protective at the time. We did what we needed to do to survive.
Yeah. I mean, thank God I was so, don't touch me as a
Yeah.
kid. And I had to be that way about my dad.
Mm.
And I had to be that way about uncles and, different people that were around, but I instinctively was like, don't even go there. And sometimes I felt like, there definitely was a disassociation, which is why I've done so much of the body work. And my God,
Yeah.
I've been in counseling for freaking ever, off and on. But I think in some ways that disassociating, you're right, it can impede many things as you get older. But sometimes even as I'm older, I'm 50 now, I've been able to utilize it. I don't have to throw it out. Like I don't have to throw the
Yeah.
baby out with the bathwater. I can still use it. Like I've had a predatory male in my life a few years ago. And there was a lot of a lot of psychological working on me mentally with this guy and emotionally. But the minute that he actually physically hugged me, I was like,
yeah,
this is not safe.
Yeah.
You can't, like, he could mess with my mind, he could mess with my emotions, but he could not mess with my body.
Yeah.
So in that way, where those things come up, I think we still can have shame and go, oh, well, we're just frozen and there's something wrong with us. And the reality is, no, you're protecting yourself. You're using those skills that don't help you all the time, but they can come in handy sometimes.
Yeah. And like they're natural in the animal world. That's what a lot of trauma is, discovering this is how we respond. And so you have to let go, of that judgment and just recognize you're doing whatever you need to do in that moment to survive. And then allow yourself to let go of the shame, and you can just heal from the trauma itself, right? As opposed to adding onto it with the shame.
Yes.
And the blame and the guilt.
I tell you, I would have had such a much easier journey through so many things in the last decade, even if I didn't have all this shame around how I was protecting myself.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because often I'll get someone who comes to me and they're like, oh, I'm so angry. I'm so angry all the time. Oh, I'm just angry. And I'm like, you know what? I can work with anger. Anger means sometimes it means you've sort of moved a little past shame because you're putting the blame where it belongs, right?
Right.
And so I actually like anger. I'm like, you have to go through this phase of anger. It's really a part of owning your boundaries. You'll find the right balance. Maybe you're overdoing it right now, but maybe it's a little bit of an overcorrection, but it is an important part of recognizing your right to have boundaries. So anger is okay. You can work with anger too. It's kind of the next step after shame, I find, when someone's healing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always think too how interesting it is when we do things so out of our comfort zone, like for me to go and work with horses, that I was very afraid of them biting me. Which the horse that I have was like, that would be absurd. I know there are horses that bite, obviously, but my horse is like, that would be absurd. How rude. She just would never do that. And thank God that was a perfect horse for me to get. But just even being around creatures like a horse that are so sensitive, they are the embodiment of what an empath is. Because they feel, they can feel this
your mood.
Yeah, exactly. And they will act out the mood that you're in and you don't even know it. And they can feel a tiny little fly crawling on them and they're 1,000 pounds, it's the ultimate princess in the pea. But what's interesting is for people that are disassociating and so on, being around other creatures, not necessarily humans, because we attach so much stuff to other humans, but being around animals that represent that, it really gets rid of all the human junk that can get in the way, because you're just with this, and that barrier isn't there, that need to, I got to protect myself emotionally from this experience. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
it's feeling
saying?
safety. It's about safety,
Yes.
right?
Thank
You
you.
feel
My
safe.
long-winded way of
Yeah, no, I know. And I love that because I also view horses as being very grounded animals. They represent grounding in a lot of
Mm.
symbolic traditions. Horses are connected to the earth, which is the element of the root chakra. So again, there is this real sense of that it's grounding. It brings you back into your body. You can almost sense the way they are in their bodies, even though they are sensitive, that you can be in your body fully and sensitive at the same time.
Right.
And that is really the heart of it. Yeah.
I can see too where different group um, therapy things I would do where, the therapist would really try to get us to be
Mm.
angry, and you're so afraid to even lift up the pot on the kettle, or the of whatever, you know what I'm saying, to let any of it out because you feel like you're going to drown in it. You're never going to get out of this anger. And of course, you have even a little bit of a release and you're like, oh my God, I feel so much
So
better.
much lighter, right? Yeah.
I think we fear that when it comes to when you've had some kind of sexual trauma, you're afraid of that orgasm, that feeling good about yourself physically, all of those things, because there's all this stuff tied to it that was dangerous. It's not okay to be sexy. It's not okay to whatever. And we feel like we're going to drown in that and we're going
Yeah.
to get lost and people can take advantage then. And so how do you work with someone where you say, okay, you are going to be safe because you're in charge now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really about creating the feeling of resilience. You
Mm,
can't say to someone, oh, you're always safe all the time, right?
right.
Objectively. What you can say is you have the inner tools to be okay no matter what. And if you know that, there is this feeling of resilience that is what really creates the sense of safety and being able to stay in our body. And for what you were talking about in relation to orgasm or other intense sensations and emotions, I like this model of the window of tolerance, that what happens after trauma is we kind of close down our window of tolerance. Often we get in this mode of, I'm only going to allow, kind of this very small range of good or bad sensations. Anything else, I'm going to disassociate from, right?
Right,
And
right.
so it's like you have to gradually increase your sense of resilience so you can gradually increase your window of tolerance, your
Mm,
faith in your ability to withstand both intensely pleasurable and intensely difficult emotions and sensations, and know that you're going to be okay. And then you don't have to walk around at the mercy of the world waiting, afraid that bad things are going to happen. Hypervigilance, right? It's really a part of reprogramming hypervigilance, which is the navel chakra. So all of those lower three chakras, you're really working to rebalance and get more comfort with them.
it's so funny. People spend so much time in the land of gurus working on those higher chakras.
Yes.
It's like they just disconnect, well, those are to your lower, like we can't,
Yes.
and no, we are, yes,
These are
we
the
are
foundation of the
spiritual.
house. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like we are spiritual beings walking around as a human. However, you do have to honor our very humanness, which is our own feral way, a primordial way of being, and you can't just ignore that exists because
Well,
it's.
and honestly, that's a lot of the people I work with. They're spiritually disassociated or spiritually
Mm,
bypassing, using their
yes.
spiritual path to bypass the psychological work that needs to be done. And
Ah,
it's a full package, right? Spiritual awakening is a full package. Yeah, no, it's a problem I feel like in the New Age community these days, of which I'm a part, right?
right.
Is this using spiritual techniques to bypass real human psychological work that needs to happen.
See, this is why I love being in the mental health field, because I love the psychology part. I would not be anywhere near where I am without having all the counseling that I've had, but I also love to dip my body into, starting with the toes sometimes, but into, spirituality and all those other things. And
Yeah.
sometimes, and I found it really interesting where people have stigma around mental health. So it's
Mhm.
it's becoming this popular thing. Oh, mental health. Corporations now want to, it's popular now. So now, and 8 years ago when I first started doing the show, they'd be like, "Ugh, don't talk about mental health." And now, oh, let's jump on your bandwagon. And that's fine.
Mhm.
I want it to be out there, but still in the spiritual world, still,
Mhm.
there's this thing. Oh, mental health. We're not. I've had people say, "Well, I don't want to.
Just think positive.
Yeah, exactly. Or I don't want to be a part of your network. It says mental health. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what isn't a part of what you're doing that's spiritual? How is that not an effect on your mental health? I mean, hello, it's kind of
What's the
funny.
point of a spirituality that does not further your mental health? I think would be the big
Exactly.
question. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had a woman who does clutter, clutter clearing for a living, give me a big lecture about how she would
Mm.
never be associated with anything to do with mental health. And I was like,
No, I
that's
see that
weird.
trend too. I see that trend too. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
That's why I love what you said about I would want someone to also be working with a
Mhm.
therapist, because then it's okay, good. You're about, not everything can be solved with one modality.
Yeah, and especially trauma. And that's why I always want to encourage people to keep seeking what really resonates and is working for you.
And
Because
it's
people can get frustrated. They try one thing and then it doesn't work and they think, oh, I'm forever scarred. I'm just the one that can never be
right,
healed, right? Or
right.
even one therapist, right? I mean, it's not always easy to find the right match, but it's there.
I think too, we always are looking for a conclusion. I'm
Yeah.
going to be healed now when I do this
Yeah.
thing. And it's ridiculous. No, I know now. I mean, I did it too. So I'm not putting that down. But now I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this new thing. And it's just another thing on my journey. And I'll
Yeah.
take what I take from it. It doesn't have to be bad or good.
Yeah, I love that. Exactly. We're all looking for this epiphany. Even that word healing can be a little misleading because it does kind of imply there's this endpoint. You're healed. I'm done. But
Exactly.
none of us are done. Whether you've experienced trauma or not, that's human life, right? There's always
Right.
growth. There's always ways to open more.
Mm.
So yeah, that's exactly how I view this kind of chakra work. It's another tool in someone's tool set that resonates for some and is helpful for some on their journey.
Fantastic. It's a very
Um, yeah.
humbling place to be too. I feel like that too about what I do. While we come to a close, I would love it if you would share with, just because, we hear about chakras all the time, but then, you kind of forget like, well, which one's which? So can you kind of give us like a real quick basic, what each chakra is, what color is associated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there actually are multiple chakra mappings that differ slightly, but I'll stick with the main 7 chakra one that most people in the West will have seen in a yoga studio picture or something like that. And that is where I start my book, is with those 7. The root chakra at the tailbone is red. It is linked to feelings of safety in the body, being able to ground. It's also linked to our immune system and our immune function. The second chakra in the pelvis is orange. This is the anchor for women's energy bodies. It's linked to emotion, sensuality, sexuality, inspiration, and adaptability, flow. The navel chakra, which I use as the focal point for the third chakra, I use the navel as opposed to higher up. It's yellow. It is linked to our willpower, our determination, our self-identification, and our ability to organize and kind of execute tasks. Do I have enough time to keep going?
Yes, absolutely. Keep
Oh,
going.
good. Okay, I'm going. Heart chakra. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Heart chakra is green, but like the color of spring leaves. It's linked to air and fresh air in nature. So think of spring leaves as green. And it is love, our ability to receive and give it. That includes divine love. It's linked to equanimity, being able to really just sit in non-judgment, acceptance, tolerance, but also sense of humor, lightheartedness, a sense of humor that is not on the backs of others, but just joy. Not mean sense of humor. Throat chakra, blue, and of course it's connected to speech, but really communication of all forms. It's also linked to our ears and listening. So it's really the whole loop of talking and hearing, the whole feedback loop, our whole way of being in the world and our authenticity. Third eye in your forehead, purple is often used, or white. In the rainbow spectrum, it's indigo. I like white or purple, but it is our insight, our intuition, and our imagination, the 3 I words. And then the crown chakra at the top of our head. I like to use gold for that one. And that is what we often call the spiritual chakra. But really, for someone who doesn't identify as spiritual, it's about meaning and purpose. What do you value? What brings meaning and purpose to your life? So that is really what the crown chakra is. So that's the whole spectrum.
That's the whole spectrum. Wonderful. Well, please tell my listeners where the name of your book again, and then where they can find out more about you.
The book is called Chakra Empowerment for Women, and that's available all the usual places, Barnes & Noble and Amazon and all of that. And the book website is also Chakra Empowerment for Women. That then connects to my client website and my blog, but I think the best place to go is Chakra Empowerment for Women, and on Instagram and Facebook, Chakra Empowerment, and on Twitter, Mommy Mystic.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to add this one last thing in the end, because I always think it's funny. Whenever there's something that I really want to focus on that gets me more in touch with, I mean, I'm about as in touch with being an empath as you can get, and I've worked hard to get there, but if we all need help. So the whole time during your interview, random, weird distractions, like some weird beeping noise that I don't know where the hell it's coming from is going off, or my phone, which I always turn off and did turn off, and it still ended up beeping. And I'm like, how did that happen? Like weird stuff. And that's why I kept muting during the interview, because I was like, this is the weirdest. It's like something maybe not wanting me to hear what's going on and experience this, was trying to like throw in some distractions. And I was like, no, I
power through.
Exactly. Power through it. And I muted it, and I looked around. I thought of the shaman that I work with, Martha, has been on many shows with me. She does the show Empowered Empaths with me now. I thought about her, how she says when she has that happen, she'll go, okay, wait a minute. Whoever's doing this, meaning, some kind of being that, isn't human, whatever spirit is doing this, I know who I am. Mm-hmm. I'm fully in my power, and you know the rules. You need to leave. And so I did that, and then magically, there's no more noise.
Yay. We powered through. We did it.
Powered through. Exactly.
Well, and I always take it as a compliment. It means something powerful is going on, or else it wouldn't be worth any interference, right?
That's true. Exactly. It is. It's a huge compliment. And I just launched our first Empowered Empath show, which I might,
oh, yay.
I might put this also on that show. But anyway, Lisa Erickson, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were able to do this, and I'm really thankful for the work that you do in the world.
Thank you, Kristin. I'm thankful for your work too, and good luck with Empowered Empaths.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio, and probably also Empowered Empaths.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial.